Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our Persian Women of MENA in Technology panel discussion, the impact of COVID-19 on startup investment. Hopefully by now you have already done some networking. Looks like my audio is not working again. Just 1 minute, there is probably a technical issue here. Okay, looks like my audio is okay now. Again, hi everyone, thank you for joining. Welcome to our online events, the impact of COVID-19 on startup investments. Hopefully by now you have already, looks like my, again, my audio is not working, just 1 second. Okay. All right. Sorry for that. There's some technical issues. I'm Sarvanaz along with Hana. We are hosting this event and from Bay Area actually, and Persian Women in Tech as of April 1st has rebranded to Women of MENA in Technology to have a larger community, to serve a larger community. We are now dedicated to empower Persian, Middle Eastern, and North African women in technology. And if you want to know more about us, please look at our website written in stage section in the chat box. Also, we are looking for team members. If you're in tech and you're interested, please send us your resume and also your LinkedIn profile, and we'll be happy to look at your resume and get back to you. And our email address actually is also on the chat box if you'd like to send us an email. We are going to have our annual and global conference on this platform on November 5th and 6th. And if you would like to sponsor, partner, or speak at our conference or have a virtual exhibit, please contact us at the email written in chat box. We would like to talk to you. Today, we're going to have a 45-minute discussion with our incredible panelists and also our incredible moderator, Angela. After that, we're going to have a Q&A. Please hold your questions, and at the end of the discussion, please write down your questions on your right-hand side. On their stage, there is a chat section that you can post your questions, and our moderator will answer you. We'll moderate the question, and our panelists will answer you. Without further ado, I'd like to invite our panelists and our moderator. I want to thank them for their time and also accepting our invitation, and I'll hand it over to Angela. Thank you for watching.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me and see me? I'm Angela Rastegar. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for putting this together. I've been following the work of what's now called Women in MENA and Technology for several years now, and I'm really impressed by the mission and the quality of events and attendees that they always pull together. It's such an important discussion, and I think now more than ever, having a sense of community to support each other, and especially for founders who I've got a chance to speak with a few of you before this are working on such incredible things. It's so important to come together and offer advice and ideas and support. So I'm really honored to moderate today. I will introduce myself briefly, and then I'll let each of the panelists who hopefully have made their way here introduce themselves too. And then we have a few questions we're going to run through together, and open it up then for questions from the audience. So at any point, if you'd like to chat questions that you hope that we'll cover in the event chat room on the right-hand side of your screen, feel free to send those throughout. I'll be monitoring that as we go through the panel. So again, just to introduce myself. I know I don't look very Middle Eastern, but I'm half Persian. I founded a fintech company that I sold in 2017 to an organization called Impacts Matters. So I had the full experience of founding, fundraising, building a team, and exiting. And then after that, spent several years working full-time as a social impact investor, both on behalf of a Bay Area foundation that invests locally and international social impact VC fund that invests in all over the world. Much of our portfolio was in Africa, India, and Latin America, actually. So I've seen kind of both sides of being on the founder side and the investor side. And now I work on behalf of two funds, a social impact seed stage fund that invests internationally in mission-driven businesses that support women and girls. And I also do Series A investing on behalf of a US-based fund that my focus is on fintech and health tech. So, and finally, my full-time role right now is I work at a healthcare company called Circle, where I'm a director. So I have seen a lot, I've worn a lot of different hats over the course of my career. I'm happy to share advice and thoughts as we go through the panel as well. But fortunately, we're joined by folks with a lot more expertise than me. So I'm going to pass the mic so everyone on the panel can have a chance to introduce yourself and your background, and also what you currently look for as an investor. So Payam, why don't we start with you? If you want to just start with those three things, your introduction, background, and what you're investing in right now.
Sounds good, Angela. And I just want to make sure my mic is working and my video is working, camera is working. Okay, good to hear. It was a little bit of a challenge to get on the platform, so I'm glad to be here. So I've been in the tech space for a long time. Back in the 90s, I started my first tech company called AutoWeb.com, which became the first online car buying service, and took that public in '99. And then since then, I've remained in the tech world. I currently own and run a company called One Planet Group, and One Planet basically, broadly speaking, does three different things. We own a few businesses, so I'm an operator. We own the largest locally targeted marketing platform on the web called BuyerLink. We own California.com. We own a product agency called Quite Remarkable. We also produce some TV shows also called One Planet Media. And so we do a bunch of different things, and we also incubate new ideas. And that's a big part of who we are. We are entrepreneurs. So Contractors.com, for example, is a business that we're launching. We also invest. So I like the ecosystem that we play in, and investing allows us to be close to entrepreneurs and work with them, which is really an exciting part of what we do. So what do we look for when we invest? What kinds of businesses do we look for? I think that there are really, there's a large spectrum, and there's no specific area that we're focused on. I think everybody will say that they're focused on entrepreneurs that they can. I think there's a bit more than that, there's a value system that we need to be aligned on beyond being good entrepreneurs or having a good idea. But broadly speaking, we invest in anything from ad tech to e-commerce to mobility. We've done quite a few investments in the drone space and autonomous driving, and also digital media like SoulPancake. I'll leave the rest for later.
I think you answered the question perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're very honored to have you.
Thank you so
Dr. Osama, I see that your video is not working, but we can hear you. So if you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself, your background, and what you're currently looking for as an investor, that would be great.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, perfect. So I presume to be an entrepreneur, mentor, and venture capitalist. On the mentorship side, I'm involved with several MENA and Canadian social entrepreneurship organizations involved in education, human capital development, business acceleration, strategic partnerships, and of course, financing. On the venture capital side, I co-manage 7 funds investing in healthcare, personalized medicine, sustainability and clean technology, blockchain and fintech, the applications of AI, and digital communication. What I look for in an investment, other than the verticals that I just mentioned, is a team that is trustworthy, cooperative.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you great. We're just going around and doing introductions, so just go on mute for 1 second, and then we'll get to you. You didn't miss anything.
Okay, sounds good.
Go ahead, Dr.
So what I look for in an investment, other than the verticals that I just mentioned, is a team that is trustworthy, cooperative, committed, and results-oriented. And also for a unique value proposition that has the double bottom line impact, value creation and improving or saving lives and livelihoods.
Thank you so much for joining. And it looks like Farron found us, so I'm glad you made it. We're just doing our introductions, Farron, about yourself, your background, and what you're currently looking for as an investor. So perfect timing.
I'm sorry, everyone. I'm technically challenged, and I'm an engineer by training, so
you missed nothing. Right?
My name is Farron Nouri, as you just heard. My background is engineering. I spent a long time, most of my career, as a technologist in semiconductor industry, essentially chasing Moore's law. Eventually, I got burned out, decided I wanted more of a business exposure, went to business school kind of late in my career, did a couple of startups, became an investor, around that time, I thought I left semiconductor industry for good, but it turned out into 2014, Lam Research, which is a semiconductor capital equipment company, approached me. They wanted to set up their venture arm, so I joined them to set up Lam Capital, which is the corporate venture arm of Lam Research, and today I manage Lam Capital. And we invest, what we like to say is that we profitably invest in companies that are strategic to us. What that means is that as we have one GP, which is Lam Research, and we invest in things that are critical to our business or our roadmap or our technology, but we also have the mandate of making money. And we are pretty much stage agnostic. We have invested, we avoid seed investments because we're not a very large group, and seed investments require a lot of company building more than we can handle, but A and B may be our sweet spot, and we are strictly business to business.
All right, well, thank you all for joining. As I mentioned, feel free, you can email questions or chat them on the side during the event, but we're just gonna start in order, starting with you, Payam, and then Dr. Osama, the order we introduced ourselves. First question, just to give everyone a sense of the lay of the land, we have a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs and founders in the audience right now. So I think the most pressing question that everyone would love to hear to start is, how do you think the fundraising landscape has changed during COVID as compared to the past? And what are the things that investors are most looking for in founders and startups today?
So I'm not sure if I can talk on behalf of other investors, but I can just tell you about us, that how our behavior has changed. Interestingly enough, about 3 weeks ago, we announced at One Planet a pitch event online, and we invited we invited Mar from Pear VC and also Stephen DeBerry from Bronze VC, and then I was a third person. We were the moderators and the judges for a panel, and we had over 50 people apply to participate in this program. We selected 5 of them, just given the time limitation we had. And we had a live program, and it was broadcasted live through Stream Live, through Facebook and YouTube. Over 80,000 people watched that.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that that was an interesting example of the thirst that I see on the side of on everybody's side, that everybody was looking for a channel to see, to participate, to present, to invest. And I think that that is really what's happening, that investors are really interested to spend more time with more entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs need to get access to VCs. But what has, I think, changed is that, at least in our case, we have raised the bar a little bit. We are more interested in businesses with a bit more traction than we probably did before. I think that we're all a little bit, at least in our case, a bit more careful about our investments to make sure that we're not just investing in ideas, but in the kinds of things that have a little bit more traction, because nobody knows exactly how long the pandemic is going to last, and even after the pandemic, what things can look like. But one thing that I believe is very clear, not just because of the pandemic, but also because of racial issues in this country, that we know that the world post-pandemic is going to look very different. And whenever you have that kind of an unknown, it affects capital allocation and how you go about investing, because there's just a big unknown. So that's it. I mean, I can just say that on our side, we're a bit more careful, and we're more interested in founders that they really know what they're doing, and they probably have a bit of traction, and they definitely are beyond proof of concept.
Thank you. That's really helpful overview. Nice and concise response too. Dr. Osama, why don't you share your point of view?
Sure. So as expected, COVID-19 did hit the VC investment landscape. So on the negative side, over the course of the past 3 months, there were only maybe 540 VC deals from the seed to Series B stage, compared to close to 1,000 in the same period in 2019. So it's between 45 to 50% decrease in deals. And the biggest impact is actually on the seed stage deals, which dropped by 57%. Approximately 70% of the startups terminated employees, and more than 60% have less than a 6-month cash runway. So it's a very, very difficult time. Of course, globally, here in the US, our Q2 GDP dropped by 35%, unheard of, at least in my lifetime. And the debt in 5 months reached $2.5 trillion. So cash is not necessarily as available as it used to be. But COVID-19 also led to an increase in entrepreneurial activities. Companies and individuals across the world have rallied to respond to, and where possible, actually tackle this crisis. We have heard of efforts to cure and provide vaccines for COVID, and of Apple and Amazon deep involvement in routine healthcare and chronic disease management. Big tech companies like Google and Microsoft are investing in healthcare companies that seek to further integrate health and technology. For example, Alphabet, Google, has invested in nearly 60 companies focused on digital health. And given the recent changes, there are other emerging opportunities related to both devices and to human connections, like in quantum computing, AR and VR, and almost 50 new applications related to work from home. So in a sense, you can say we're going through a very difficult time, but perhaps the best is yet to come.
Thank you. Farron?
Yeah, so I think for us, I'm a corporate VC and investing in B2B. So from our point of view, the world hasn't shifted. Well, the world has changed forever and profoundly, but our investment thesis has remained the same. We do things that are business to business and impact our business. There has been a little bit of a shift in the sense that we have experienced supply chain disruption like everybody else, and we are looking at bringing opportunities to bring supply chain closer to home. Or we just did an investment in additive manufacturing in a US company startup that is making us closer, bringing us closer to digital manufacturing. So some of those things which we already had in our roadmap the interest in them are heightened. I see that a lot of financial investors that we co-invest with, like Sandhill investors, they've been a lot more cautious. We've definitely seen less deployment of capital. We've seen terms that are more friendly to investors. We've seen dramatic drops in valuation in some cases, depending on where you are. But I think in general, the B2C or consumer to businesses are more affected because consumer behavior is so profoundly affected. And even for us, I completely agree with Payam that you go more back to some of the things you always do, but even more so. Like you always want to invest in the best team. You always want to invest in sound businesses, sound ideas, but more scrutiny. We're doing everything just with a little bit more scrutiny. We're really I really care that we are investing in things that are going to weather this crisis. And of course, again, I agree with Payam that we will definitely, and Dr. Osama mentioned that too, that post-COVID will be a really different world. And I'm really hesitant to talk about unprecedented times because I've heard unprecedented so many times or paradigm shift. But if there really was a time that unprecedented applied and a paradigm shift post-COVID, I think now is the time. It's definitely going to be different. The trouble is we don't know exactly how. So that
Angela, if I could just add, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, Angela, if I could just add something. I think another element that is really important to keep in mind for founders and entrepreneurs is that, at least again, I can speak on our behalf, it's the issue of racial justice in the country that also, at least in our case and many other VCs' case, is going to play a role. I think that everybody is becoming a lot more cognizant of the problems in Silicon Valley, that for years, women have not been getting funded at the same rate as men. We have not been funding Black entrepreneurs the same way that we've been funding white entrepreneurs and many other minority groups as well. So I think that if you have a management team as a company made up of a bunch of just white guys, you're going to have a hard time. I think the VCs are going to need to be a lot more worried to do the right thing. So work on your diversity, represent the country in the way that you set up your team. Having said that, I will also say that I don't necessarily want entrepreneurs to worry about difficult times too much either, because it's starting a business almost like getting ready for your wedding day. There is no perfect day. You just got to commit to it and move forward. And at times, difficult days, difficult times are the best time to start a company as well. Because of the fact that everybody is running away doesn't mean you should also run away from it. In fact, that may be exactly the right time. There could be fewer competitors out there, individuals who are willing to have the courage to start a business during this time. And I know as an entrepreneur, the company I'm running now, it actually started in April of 2001, the month that we had the crash, the dot-com crash happen. And that turned out to be the best time we could have started this business. So I don't think that entrepreneurs should try to time the market, but they should definitely adjust so they're behaving in the right manner for the market conditions.
That's an excellent point and kind of brings me to my next question. So thank you for touching on that. All great responses. I think it's clear that there are going to be fewer opportunities to find funding right now, and entrepreneurs are going to have to be a bit more scrappy and conservative. One of the things I always struggle with the most as an investor is advising founders on, how to plan for a shorter runway or a shrinkage in the capital that they anticipated or they felt they needed to build the product and service that they want to build. So with that in mind, what advice would you give founders right now to really prepare for kind of adjusting their runway, hiring, to kind of be able to pivot and survive this potential downturn, which is probably going to lead to a lot less access to capital than founders were intending?
Who do you want to go first?
I was going to leave it open and see if anyone could jump in.
Sure. I'll say that the changes we observe today may be viewed as a double-edged sword. Some might argue that the crisis could negatively impact the risks associated with entrepreneurship and ultimately hinder startups in attracting the right talent. Others might suggest that the changes we observe today could actually alter perceptions of entrepreneurship for the better. And why do I say that? Because I've lived through 4 crises before and witnessed how life has actually turned around. So you may remember, well, maybe not, in 1979, the energy crisis, you actually had to line up for 45 minutes to fill up your gas tank. There was the Iran hostage crisis, the Iran-Iraq war, and yet it followed by an absolutely blossoming time for enterprise software and semiconductor companies through the 80s. We come to the end of the 80s in 1987, 1990, the stock market collapsed in 1987. The Berlin Wall fell. San Francisco was shaken by an earthquake, which led to Highway 480 completely disappear, and the 280 being the only exit. There was the pro-democracy in Tiananmen Square, so there was a lot of friction, if you will. And yet, in 1990 is when the Human Genome Project was launched, and now we have gene sequencing. Tim Berners-Lee created the first web server and foundation for the World Wide Web. And by the way, just as an aside, since we're talking about equality, Nelson Mandela was released from prison. So it was very, very good. And then, as we talked about in 2000, the market collapsed. The large corporations market value dropped by about 90%. Cisco from 450 billion to 50 billion. And yet that same year, Wikipedia was launched. USB, camera phone, Bluetooth, and 2 years later, LinkedIn. Pretty awesome innovations that were not expected. In 2008, we had the financial meltdown, which we all lived through and felt. And yet in the next 2 years, amazing companies were created. Airbnb, Uber, WhatsApp, Slack in Vancouver, and Instagram.
Yeah.
So I'll get back into saying it's usually when we have these type of challenges that absolutely amazing, innovative minds outside of the tradition create very high impact value propositions.
I think it's a very helpful perspective to take that long-term view. However, also having been a founder, understand kind of the reality of watching your runway shrink and worrying about how you're going to make payroll. Any other thoughts from anyone else?
I think I agree that long term, even I agree with all those crises. And even if I started reading about the 1918 flu, and actually as bad as that was, 1920s or the roaring 20s happened after 1918 flu. It was followed by this amazing spending, which, we may have roaring 20s again in a couple of years. I mean, I'm not trying to, say that's necessarily what's going to happen, but usually after these crises, there will be a boom that follows. The question is, how long is this going to be? And we really don't know. There may be a depression even, and it's worldwide, which really hurts. And you don't have any region that's not affected by COVID. So GDP of everybody's GDP is dropping dramatically, and unemployment is really high. So in terms of surviving in the immediate near term, I would say everybody has to tighten the belt on spending. Every one of our portfolio companies have already done so, and focus on that. Really bring a lot of focus on what you must do now, and really tighten spending. If you don't have to raise money now, well, this is not a good time to raise money. Postpone it. Some of our companies are actually raising money now, or doing notes instead of raising a round to bridge, and get to the other side. I mean, there are no magic solutions. Some of the SBAs or PPP, in some cases for our portfolio companies, have been useful. Not everyone applies to it, and you need to talk to your council and make sure you're doing the right things regarding SBA or government help like that. Some of our companies have taken advantage of that. And at the end of the day, it takes leadership to navigate through this time. So the resilient win, but that's not really an answer. But the best will survive it on the other end. There will be some dead bodies along the way, inevitably.
Absolutely. I think that it's a very helpful long-term perspective. Just thinking really tactically for the founders on the line, what advice would you give them in terms of how they can best position their pitch if they do feel like they need to fundraise today? So for example, cutting out, any non-essential activities, being hyper-focused on traction and proof of concept, getting to a certain revenue number. I think there's a few kind of tick marks that will really make an investor perk up in this economy. So are there any specific things that founders on the line can do to tailor their pitch and their strategy if they do feel like they want to pursue raising funds right now?
So I'll respond to that. Before I go there, I just want to mention something about the last question, and that is, there were names of many successful companies mentioned that have come about during this crisis. But I think that that's the problem with Silicon Valley, that we celebrate these very, very few successes. And frankly, that mentality ruins many entrepreneurs and ruins many people who join startups because they think that is the outcome they're signing up for. For every person who's made money from stock options in Silicon Valley, there are hundreds of companies that their stock options were worth zero. So it's really important to know the reality, because for every one of those poster childs, there are thousands that did not survive. And that is Silicon Valley. It's okay to fail in Silicon Valley. There's nothing wrong with it. But I just think that we need to be cognizant of that. But I would say that if you either have cash flow or if you don't. If you don't have cash flow, you really got to watch your cash, because money can run out very quickly. So I would say that you're only absolutely focused on the absolute essentials. So start building up your costs from ground up, meaning that assume for a moment you're not committed to anyone and anything, and then decide for how many months do you want to be secure. Then build a cost structure that will work with the money you have, not the other way around. That, well, I really like Joe, I love to keep Joe. Well, you may not be able to have Joe. You need to plan based on what you have. That's one. The second thing is that if you do have cash flow, then make sure that you are taking as much money as you can towards whatever allows you to scale. So the money should be spent on not the nice haves, whether it's people or other forms of resources, but rather on the kinds of things that will scale your revenue and nothing else. Everything else, from my perspective, is a nice to have, not a must have, because you're after survival, you're not after building bells and whistles. And if you want to position yourself for raising money, know your numbers well. Absolutely understand what it takes to scale your business. So if you're pitching to a VC, you're telling them that I want to raise money not because I want to move to a bigger office space, so after COVID-19 I'm ready for whatever number of people I'm going to hire, but rather I need to raise money because these are the specific KPIs that I'm experiencing. This is how I can scale. If I have more money and put it against this engine, here's what's going to happen to my numbers. And as a result, if need be, I'm able to survive until I have to raise money again and accelerate my growth. I'm surprised by how many founders I see that they don't fully understand that piece. What does it take to scale your business? What does it take to get to cash flow break even? And they usually give me a dance around and not specific numbers and formulas. And that's typically what I'm after.
Excellent advice. Thank you, Payam. Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Sure. As far as advice to entrepreneurs, learning from our 74 portfolio companies that we are constantly in touch with, the recommendation based on what they said works is, number one, to adopt and be comfortable working online. It's not easy, but it can potentially work. Of course, to reduce expenses, to seek support from the investors, and it's a good time to explore strategic partnerships. And I'm saying this because PNI is a spin-out from our personalized medicine initiative at the University of British Columbia. This company is actually focused and has been focused for 7 years on accelerating the creation of transformative medicines through cell therapy, immuno-oncology, CRISPR, and gene editing. Their revenues were growing 35% per quarter, and then they immediately stalled in the last 4 months. What to do? It was to explore opportunities rather than stay on the same track. So they recently announced a co-development agreement with a Chinese company called CanSino Biologic to co-develop a COVID-19 RNA vaccine. The parties will leverage PNI, Precision Nanosystem RNA vaccine platform, to rapidly advance a COVID-19 vaccine candidate towards human critical testing and pursuant to regulatory approvals, commercialization across the globe. So I would say, luckily but politely, COVID opened for PNI a large emerging market. They just had to pay attention and accelerate.
Farron, anything you'd like to add?
I think that, like Dr. Osama mentioned, there are some that are some companies that are beautifully positioned to take advantage of current trends. Of course, not everyone is going to be in that situation. Um, um, the ones you do what your startup is what it is, but I think nothing focuses the mind when like being in a survival mode. And in some ways, sometimes when you're in those survival mode times, your performance is at peak because you really are focused, you know what matters. And the ones who know, how to choose what matters and focus on what matters will be in much better standing. And I wouldn't try to raise money, but if you have to and you're running out of cash for whatever reason and you need to raise money, then I think you really need to do your homework. You really need to be prepared and communicate the information about what you're doing, why, what scaling issues, all of that, who you are replacing, who's going to pay for all of these questions. You need to be really communicating those to whoever is going to hand you money.
Absolutely. All really helpful tips on refining your pitch. But I think to Payam's point, it's important, this might be controversial to say, but it's important to look at your company under the current reality. And the truth is not every company is going to survive, nor is every business that was built a few years ago needed in this new reality. So I do think there's an element of being honest with yourself and your team about whether or not the new reality and the trends that we're seeing post-COVID are going to warrant your business model, because there is a ton of opportunity to build great teams, to attract great talent at a very low cost right now, and to be positioning yourself for the world post-COVID. But I think it's also important as a founder and an entrepreneur to realize your time is limited, your career is short, and you should really be emphasizing and focusing your energy on things that are going to be needed. So if you feel like when you really take an honest look at your business and the services that you're creating, if that's not relevant in this new reality, then there's no shame in walking away and working on something new, because there are going to be a lot of really amazing opportunities that come out of this as well. So kind of along those lines, I would be curious to hear from everyone on the panel how COVID has changed your investment thesis and what trends in the future you would be most interested in and excited about seeing startups work on in this new emerging reality.
Angela, I'll take that. And, talking about failures, by the way, and it's okay to say that, all right, this is not the right time to build it. I've had spectacular failures that, building the business did not make it to the front page, but failing at it did make it to the front page for some odd reason. And, but that is part of being an entrepreneur, because often you hear that people keep telling you persevere. Persevere by itself is not good enough. You also need to know when you're persevering against an idea that should no longer receive your attention, because your time is very valuable and you don't want to be wasting it against something that's not going to go anywhere. I'm going to answer your question a little bit differently, because I think there's a strategy that we have is very different than what we had maybe years ago, and also very different. That has nothing to do with COVID-19, and that is the name of our company, One Planet, stands for something. So the one planet is meant to communicate the ideas around the fact that humanity is one, and the fact that we are noble beings and we should care about the trace that we leave behind as a result of however we spend our time, our lives, and the economic life that we live is an arena of how we choose to basically have it reflect the values that are important to us. So while we don't invest in social impact businesses, we do invest in businesses that they have an agenda for social good, that they have an agenda that allows the founder, the management team, live a journey worth living. Because again, keep in mind, in Silicon Valley, we're often focused on the outcome, but the journey takes many, many, many years. The outcome is not the life. The life is the journey. And we want that journey to be a worthwhile journey. So we're interested to work with founders, management teams that we feel as a result, as a consequence of us giving them cash, we're not going to be regretting it, that we did not do it as a result of fueling greed, but we did it as a result of that our investment is resulting in a group of people building something that ever so slightly can leave the world a better place. And that is something that's really core to our investments. And often our values are not aligned. When we invest in companies, we ask our founders to sign a document that is called for the betterment of the world. And they commit to do certain things. They commit to do profit sharing with their employees. I know it could be long ways before they are actually profitable, but when they commit to sacrificial giving and philanthropic work, and not just wait till they're millionaires and billionaires, but start doing it now. And that way of life is something that we'd like to promote.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think in the current environment, that sentiment is actually more attractive than ever to investors. So I really appreciate that emphasis. Any other thoughts on kind of future trends and your investment thesis?
We used to invest in life sciences, but we no longer do. It's no longer strategic to us. As a corporate VC, we are looking to invest in things that like digital manufacturing that bring our supply chain close to us, make our business so that dependencies on work from lab are not as severe, that you can run your lab from your desk, for example, build a digital twin of everything within the company, what we call Industry 4.0, the full digital manufacturing platform. So this work from home is, I think, something that will be semi-permanent for Lam Research for some people, so gradually we will all go. I mean, I think the working environment is forever changed. We just figured out things that we thought is never possible. How could everybody work from home all the time and be productive? We're doing it, and we always thought that when a customer in Asia called, we would send a whole plane load of people to Asia to deal with the customer's problem. We haven't been able to do it. And guess what? We've still been solving problems. We've been doing field engineering remotely through AR and VR. So we are seeing that's just, we're amazing ourselves about how efficient you can be. You're not as efficient as always. There's some broken pieces, but you can clearly see we can get there. We've been a lot more efficient than we thought we were going to be. So this complete digital manufacturing is going to be here to stay, and addressing supply chain disruptions is here to stay for us. I think it will definitely lead, and I'm talking non-consumer business completely. It's all highly industrialized AR, VR stuff. But that's going to be a lot more of what we will do.
Absolutely. Dr. Osama, as you mentioned, you've seen a lot of different eras throughout your history as an investor. What trends do you think are here to stay today?
Oh, thank you. Well, if I go back to 1990, the unemployment in California was 18%. All the Japanese companies had left. DARPA had stopped financing the development of the internet. So in other words, it was as bad as you can possibly imagine. But if you look at it from a different perspective, you could actually hire the best talent you can imagine. And in this case, it was my very first startup. taking the team out from UCSB, University of California, Santa Barbara, that were actually financed to develop the internet so that we can create a company that would enable access to the internet via routers, if you will. And surprisingly, at the beginning, it was like $500,000. Most of it came from my good friend, the inventor of Ethernet, Dr. Charlie Bass. But then the inbound interest from venture capitalists was absolutely stunning. We needed 3 million and ended up with 14 million. So I'm assuming that if any of our entrepreneurs actually have a value proposition that people can immediately support and say, yeah, we need that, fundraising is going to be relatively straightforward, or at least that has been my experience. What has enabled it to grow was not by building marketing and sales team and product management and what have you, but through corporate partnerships. So it can be Ericsson, who can be a combination of value-added resellers, if you will, as well as investors. At that time, the number of corporate partners was, I don't know, maybe about 10. Today, in Silicon Valley alone, there are more than 250, and they come from all over the world, from Korea and Taiwan and China, from all over the world. So it's not a bad time. It's a very, very good time. As far as my investments are concerned, I actually decided to start to focus on providing Series A and Series A financing to our portfolio company so that growth doesn't stop. So instead of investing in new startups, invest for business acceleration. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So we have a few minutes for Q&A, which I believe means that if you are listening, you can ask a question live, or you can also just chat it on the side. I can read it out if you can't figure out how to get your mic going. But we'd love to hear any questions from people who are listening in. You can direct them at any of the panelists if you want to put them on the spot. I'm not a panelist, so anyone other than me, just send them a tough question. While we're waiting on questions to come in, if each of you guys could just share a little bit about what you'd like to discuss in the breakout room. So the next section of this event is individual rooms with each of you, where folks can stop by and talk about topics of interest to them. So yes, you can ask via audio. And before we wrap up, I'll just ask the panelists to answer that question. So if you are able to ask via audio by turning on your audio, you can. Otherwise, it might be easier for you to just chat your question and I can read it. I'm not completely sure what happened will allow. So while we're waiting for the questions to come in, do you each mind just saying a couple words about what you would love to cover in the breakout session? Any of you can start. How about you?
I'm happy to speak about whatever is a subject that those who show up are interested to. I have no agenda.
I would love to hear what challenges people are facing, or they think that what they're seeing out there, but also open to any topics of interest as well.
And I'm sorry I mentioned to Sepide that I do have another commitment. So as a consequence, I'm not going to bore anyone by by intruding. So hopefully they will be very, very happy to get some advice from Payam and Farhan.
Okay, great. So yeah, one question that came in is around fundraising for nonprofits or social good programs from a founder who's working on neurodiversity inclusion. So I think, and just to answer that specifically, or even more broadly, any other sources of capital besides VC funding would be great to talk about.
I mean, I can tell you from my perspective that I'm involved in nonprofits. I'm on the board of Tahrir Justice Center, which is an organization that basically provides free legal services to women subject to gender-based violence. And also I'm on the board of a school. And the way I've seen it so far is that the ecosystem for raising money for nonprofit is fundamentally different. than for-profit. It may ultimately be the same people, but it rarely has anything to do with their entities. Or you go after, grants from government or other foundations, but it's completely a different skill set and different ecosystem and community you got to go after.
I think that by having people that are, mind and heart engaged, it is the best of times, quite frankly, to be able to support social entrepreneurship initiatives, nonprofits that have a human impact.
Yeah.
One of the top 3 universities in Canada has an advisory board, and the dean said that due to COVID-19, the shortage this year for the School of Applied Science alone will be $100 million.
Oh my God.
Students are not coming and so on. And surprisingly, 32% of the students said massive open online courses are not good for us, and we don't know if we should be spending time in these courses because it's not going to lead to employment, right? So the Dean Advisory Council actually pitched in, and they will raise the $100 million. Some of them will come from the individuals, and the other one is going to come from institutions that they know are very interested in education. It took 2.5 months and was achieved.
Great. I'll just add a few comments on alternative sources of capital, since the company I founded was a B Corp, and I've also worked with nonprofits and within nonprofits. I think family offices are always an interesting place to tap into, especially if you have a mission-driven company, and can find some connections there, because they'll usually reserve a portion of their capital for alternative or early stage investing, especially if it's mission-driven. Corporate venture capital arms actually often have a mandate of a certain number of dollars to deploy each year, or a certain number of deals that they're trying to achieve each year. So they might be a little less reactive right now to the economic trends than you might see in a typical VC fund that can be more selective and pull back. So I would look at corporate VCs that have aligned interests. And there's a number of grants, loans, the small business loans. I think there's a ton of government aid right now for businesses that is being pretty generous. So even if it doesn't seem like it necessarily applies to you, the general advice from the business departments are just to apply and see what happens. And there's a lot of everything from $10,000 checks to much beyond that. So I would check out those sources as well. I do think founders tend, especially in Silicon Valley, tend to get kind of caught up in chasing the VC dollars when there's actually a lot of other options available for you to find capital.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Great. And then we got another question from Prince. I don't know if you guys can read it on the side about whether or not you would recommend if let's see, what he's saying. If you would reach out to investors or organizations where there's aligned interest in solving kind of the social challenges or interests, if you have shared, I think he's asking, is it better to focus on investors that have shared interests and mission, perhaps?
As I've raised many VC rounds for my businesses, and I still have the wounds from them. It's a challenging process, and typically when you get a term sheet, you're so happy you got a term sheet and you don't question the rest. So I think that, and I think that especially in this environment, yeah, I would like to be an academic and tell you that go raise money from people who this and that and that. But you know what? If somebody's giving you money and contractually you're protected so you can build your business the way you want to build it.
And take as much as they're giving you. It's okay to have a little bit more.
I agree. I think, terms are not going to be as favorable this year as we've seen in the past. And if that means, giving out a slightly higher portion of your company to build something that you're really passionate about and love. I think that's the reality of today's environment. You're gonna see compressed valuations, and I think there's really little alternative if you need that cash to grow. So if you're
that's actually a really good point. I've seen examples just in the post-COVID time that flexibility, both on the entrepreneur and investor side, have made deals happen that could easily fall apart. So be flexible and open to things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's totally okay to give out a larger percentage of your company right now. I think that's just going to be the reality, and you know, if you've given out a third of something that ends up being billions of dollars, you'll still be in a great position.
Yeah.
Okay, we're just getting one more question about the process of pitching at your respective firms. So you know, I guess, how do people get in touch with you? What's the best way to contact and present an idea your way?
I am typing in the email address.
We are at lamcapital.com.
I would just add, today more than ever, I think getting a warm intro is super critical, because investors are going to be inundated with pitches. So find a personal connection, find someone who can vouch for you, and really, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you, but I also in agreement with you. Also make sure you're aligned with the interest of VCs you're sending material to, because, you know, some people just send massive 100 things. It's really important to do your work, do your homework.
If I may add that there are so many incubators now, between 500 startups and Plug and Play Tech Center and Y Combinator. So it's really the best of time for entrepreneurs to apply, galvanize and what have you. There are so many networks of angel investors right now. Apparently, the number is 180,000 angel investors. And therefore, getting the initial funding should not necessarily be very, very challenging, assuming that the feeling that the investor has about the implied covenants of good faith in dealing in the presenter, that it is not bullshit presentation. And at the same time, some good value propositions and what have you, then in that case, it should be really pretty straightforward. And I'm very, very surprised that people who can raise $750,000 in 2 to 3 weeks, basically pretty much online.
Angela, I just wanted to add 2 things based on the last couple of items brought up. One is about a warm connection. I frankly think that's a must, because if you reach out to me on LinkedIn or DM me on Instagram, the chances are very low that I can keep up or I can actually go through these messages and respond. But if you have a warm connection, then that will make all the difference. But I provided I put Angel Fund. It should be Angel Fund at oneplanetops.com, but you guys hopefully will figure that out. The other thing is, just wanted to answer to Prince about giving out a larger percentage of the business and the impact I can have. I think that's a challenging thing, because on one hand, if you need to raise money and the business is not going to survive, well, you need to raise money, even if it's very dilutive. On the other hand, I can tell you that as an investor, I'm always concerned if I see that the founder is not ending up with enough ownership, because I'm worried that then quickly they can lose interest. That is partly why I don't invest in startups with more than 2 founders, because I feel that very quickly each founder gets to a number that is too small for them. And they feel that whether it's the right answer or not, they feel that they should leave to build a new business where they can own a significant portion of it. So I think that as much as, Prince, that's a concern for you, I think that good investors would be also concerned for you, and they would understand that maximizing their ownership is not always the best way to
It's
maximizing
a
their
great
return.
point. But I will add, I mean, if you're raising venture capital, you're bringing other decision makers into the door. So you're gonna, like, building a business with venture funding by its nature means giving out some of the control and allowing others who hopefully have expertise and experience to weigh in as well. So you're not going down a path that's going to allow you to have complete control. So hopefully it will be a balance of giving out ownership to the right people who, you know, can push back on you and be a thought partner to you as well. Okay, well, I think with that, we're going to let our organizers come on to just say a few words and kind of give us some instructions on next steps. I personally just want to say a huge thank you to the panelists for sharing all of your expertise and wisdom to this panel. It was really wonderful to hear your thoughts and an honor to participate with you guys. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, I'd
Thank
like
you, Angela.
to
Really
thank
appreciate it.
all our panelists for the incredible discussion and their invaluable ideas and experience that they shared with us. Also, thank you, Angela, for perfectly moderating this panel. And I want to mention some points. So me and Hannah are here. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask in the chat section or email us. And we're gonna have a networking session. So on your left-hand side, there are sessions, and you can click on those. It'll direct you to different networking sessions, or there are some virtual rooms for each panelist that you can go and network with them. And please keep in mind that five people, five per person in each panelist's virtual room is allowed to talk at the same time. You can still watch if there are more than 5 people. But if you done chatting with your panelists, please stop sharing to let other people chat with the panelists, and you can still sit there and watch the discussion. With that said, I'll thank you. I'll thank all our attendees to attend this discussion and taking time. And I'll see you in the networking sessions.
So Sarvanos, do we need to go to the networking sessions now as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. See you soon.
Thank you.